Good evening. I do have Amit. Hi, Amit. How are you doing?
Hey, Sridhar. Nice to be talking again.
Again, yes, we are right now entered the semifinal stage of the ICC T20 World Cup. So let's quickly, before we get into the preview of the semifinalists, I'll just mention who are the semifinalists are. So we have India taking on England, and then South Africa taking on the upstarts, Afghanistan, a huge upset that we will definitely talk about since Australia is not in the Final Four right now. So let's get down to business and quickly get your initial thoughts on the four semifinalists, and then we can go back and look at some of the important games in Super 8, and then a look ahead to the both the semifinals. All
Yep,
right?
yep, sounds good.
Okay.
Which one do you want to start with?
All right, let's start with the from a semifinals. Let's start talk about the four teams that made it uh, so far, and your impression on how they are fared so far, and then their chances going into the semifinal.
Sure. So, Sridhar, we were 50% right. If I remember, we picked India, Australia, England, and West Indies to make it, right? So, two out of
Right.
four actually did. India and England. Australia not making it was a complete shocker, especially the game that they lost versus Afghanistan. So, we can cover that later. But okay, those four teams, I mean, I think it's kind of cool to look at their journeys, right? Like India and South Africa are undefeated, I believe, both
Hmm.
teams,
Yes,
right?
you're right.
And and it shows. I mean, number one seeding. There's a minor advantage in one versus two. I was reading the rules, so like if these there's rain expected, I don't think people are expecting necessarily the games to be washed out, but there is rain expected during both the semifinals. So you should expect games similar to what we've had last couple of days, right? Stop and start, stop and start. But if for some reason the games get washed out, and I think they've also changed the rules for the semis that teams have to play a minimum of 10 overs each, otherwise the game is called off. So if the game is called off, then the number one seeds go to the finals. So in some ways, that's the prize that India and South Africa get for being number one. I think India's been. I mean, on paper, India looks, or on track record, India looks like the best team, to be honest, because South Africa, even though they won all their games, they have not been convincing victories, and they almost choked against West Indies in an elimination game, right? But they held their nerve, so maybe this is their year where they kind of get over the hump. They're pulling out these narrow wins, and maybe that's actually helping them.
And let's
Whereas,
not forget, staying on
Mhm.
South Africa, let's not forget the win that South Africa had against Nepal. They only won by, um, I would say, one run. I mean, they scored 115. Nepal almost had a chance to win it all,
Yeah,
but
if I'm not mistaken, I think pretty much every game of theirs has been close. I mean, maybe like some really weak team they beat out easily, but I think even their game versus England was a close game. I think USA, it was close up to a certain point. I think against USA, South Africa scored like 190, and then US came up to like 170. So I guess not that close. But in general, like even in the earlier stage, you're right. Nepal, Netherlands, like all these guys, there was a time when they were under the gun, but they pulled through. So maybe that helps them. Maybe they're just waiting to be upset because they're not that good. Who knows, right? Who knows how these things go? And then England, if you really think about it, Sridhar, I think we are talking about this earlier today, right? Like, whom have they really beaten, right? They lost to Australia, they lost to South Africa, West Indies for sure. They beat West Indies. Um, I mean, USA kind of tapered off, right? So I don't know if that's like a resounding victory or anything like that. Of course, they dominated like Scotland, or not Scotland. They were like these couple of really weak teams.
Namibia and Oman.
Yeah, like in the earlier stage, they demolished them. Like and they
Right.
demolished US as well. So I think against weak opponents they've really done well, but when they played good opponents, they kind of won and two, right? Like they won against West Indies. And was that a close win?
Very no, it was not even close. I mean, they West Indies scored
Oh, that's right.
180, and
Saw it.
then England actually scored 181 for two,
Yeah, Yeah.
and they uh, got home in with 10 balls to spare. Salt was just
Yeah,
incredible
Salt
that
scored
match.
87 or whatever, right? Yeah, yeah, yeah.
87, and then you had
Eckler
Bairstow
scored one.
actually came to form.
Bairstow, right,
He
right.
missed he
Correct.
missed his 50 by 2 runs, but they
Yeah,
were impressive against England, and they literally overwhelmed United States. They won uh, pretty much going away by 10 wickets.
right. So
Uh,
I'll rephrase my opinion about, not opinion, but their track record, right? Like either they lose close games to good teams or they absolutely dominate teams. Like that's how it's been for them, right? When they win in a dominant fashion. And when they lose, um, whatever. I think the South Africa game was close, but
it's very. I think South Africa won by very close 7 runs or
right.
something like that. I
And
think.
England was absolutely winning at one point in that game while chasing, and then they lost their way. Um, I mean, I'll never. They're the defending champions, and they play the same attacking brand of cricket, right? That Australia plays. So I would never ever rule them out. Um, and then Afghanistan, man. I mean, the whole world is kind of cheering for them, right? I wonder if they have, they're going to have like an emotional letdown. They've been on an emotional high for two games in a row, and they're playing on alternative days, really, right? Like they will play tomorrow. They played on Monday. They played on Saturday. Um, so that's got to be draining at some point, both physically and emotionally. So I wonder if that will show in their game against South Africa. But man, they've kind of earned their way in. That was no fluke beating Australia. They made Australia look very rattled, which I've never seen. And in the end,
And
they
it was
won pretty
almost
handily.
pedestrian. Australia lost by 21 runs. So
Yeah, that was a
uh,
pretty big margin for a low score, right? I mean, this was like 148 or something. So,
and Australia was all out. I mean, they were all out for
right,
127. So it was
that's right,
not that Australia had wickets in hand. It was a complete
right.
domination by Afghanistan against Australia. Again, this was a very sweet revenge for Afghanistan,
Right.
considering they had Australia on the ropes in the World Cup in India just a few months ago, where Glenn Maxwell pretty much changed the fortune with a double hundred.
Mhm.
And it seemed that way for a while. But um, then, kudos to Afghanistan for staying. I mean, Glenn Maxwell was still the highest scorer, 59, but once he fell, it was just a matter of procession. Naib was just impressive with like 4 wickets, and then, even though Rashid Khan didn't take major wickets, I
Yeah,
think he
he's a
just gave up like 23 runs in 4 overs.
yeah. So I mean, on paper, in theory, India is the strongest team among the four, but we know India has kind of choked in the semi-final or final stage in the past few, whether it's T20 or ODI or Test Championship matches, right? So they got a little bit of that monkey on the back as well right now. It's not just South Africa or New Zealand for that matter. So it'll be interesting. I mean, technically, India is the strongest team, and this is their time. But I think all four teams have a good shot. I think these are pretty good teams.
Yeah, sometimes the best team doesn't win. Like you talked about, going back to these 4 teams just before we get on to the actual preview. Uh, the way these 4 teams are entering the semifinals, I definitely see England entering in a much more positive attitude. At what point, even during the group stages, it looked like England could be out of that. Um, the Super Eights. But since then, when they did lose to South Africa, but England has actually coming in pretty strong to the semifinals. India, having just beaten Australia, is coming off pretty strong. Um, South Africa, like you said, they've not been dominating, but give them credit. I mean, they've not lost a single game yet in the
Yep.
so far in the Super Eight, even in Super Eight or group stages. And then the last team, Afghanistan, just by the virtue of beating Australia, one of the world champions in T20 cricket. I mean, they should have their confidence running high. I mean, they have the bowling attack. Little suspicious on their batting attack because they did collapse against India in the Super Eights, but I think all these 4 teams are coming in with like different aspects of confidence. just some teams just being purely dominant, like India and England so far, or just South Africa just making it enough to get there, and then Afghanistan just playing with house money because they're not supposed to be there. They are currently there, and you still have to play the matches on the pitch. So let's go quickly into a couple of the matches that we had in Super 8s, and I think we did touch upon that. I think let's talk about the Australia and India, which just happened yesterday, um, where I did think that Australia did have many chances to win the game. But your thoughts on the India Australia matchup, because that's the marquee matchup, and then we can get down to a couple of other Super 8 key matchups, and then we can quickly jump into the semifinals that is going to be starting tomorrow.
Yeah, I think India's clearly come in with a plan, just like they did in the ODI World Cup as well, which is to be aggressive at the top, and that's even more relevant in a T20 game because it's only 20 overs, and they've stuck to that plan, and that paid rich dividends, and I think that is the way to go against teams like England and Australia, especially, who are like very aggressive, right? So I mean, you can't against these teams, you can't put up like a 160 and expect to win. You really need a high score if you go in first. Uh, I think Rohit Sharma made all the difference. It's probably one of his best innings that I've seen in a long, long, long time. Like just absolutely dominant, and whatever he was doing was working. And even though Surya didn't last that long, I think he was like just amazing. Without like brute force hitting and all that, suddenly you look up and he's like, I don't know, 30 something of 18 balls or whatever, something like that. Pretty neat, right?
Mhm.
I think India took the game to them. I mean, Zampa, right? Zampa's been so successful, both in terms of run rate and especially taking wickets. They put pressure on him first ball, first over onwards. I don't think he troubled them at all. They didn't let him trouble him, right? Same thing with Stark. I mean, I know Stark came back with a couple of wickets, but they hammered him. So
Same thing with Stoinis. I mean, he gave up 56
Stoinis,
runs in
exactly. They didn't let him settle. I mean, sometimes it's guy. I mean, he actually took a wicket, right? But
two.
he got hammered. Everyone got hammered. Pat Cummins got hammered too. Um, so nobody was spared really. Um, I was surprised Australia didn't try Glenn Maxwell, especially in the power play against Kohli and Sharma. Maybe it wouldn't have mattered if Sharma was in that mood, but I think we kind of struggled to put away spinners in the power play. Generally against spin, but especially in the power play. So I think that kind of set the tone. But again, give it to the Aussies, right? I mean, when Marsh and Head were batting, and later on when Maxwell and Head were batting, it looked like these guys are going to cruise and maybe even reach the target in less than 20 overs.
Yeah, they
Honestly,
were 87 for one in 8 overs, so they were going at a good 10 over,
no, they
10
were
runs
in 10
per over
overs. They were
clip.
115 or something. They're like even beyond that. They were good. Like they needed at yeah,
Well, they were
yeah,
128, 120-ish for two when Maxwell was going really
right,
well, closer to the 13 overs. So, when you think about that, they were chasing 205 and they were almost like 125 runs for 2 wickets. So they just had about 80 runs to go in about 7 to 8 overs, which is like they only needed 10 runs an over with
right.
8 wickets in hands. And considering their batting attack uh, with like Tim David and Wade and those guys still available, I
I
think
think it
it
was a
was.
little. You could see like for a new. I think that's been the theme throughout this World Cup, right? A new batsman
And the
coming in.
Travis Head was still. I mean, Head was still there.
Head was
Well, the
there, but
way Head
a
and
new
Maxwell
batsman
were
coming
going,
in was having trouble hitting, right? In general, like they couldn't like. I think these are the kind of pitches where someone once they're settled, they can absolutely hit. Um, but new batsmen couldn't just like ball one start hitting, right? So um, by the way, this match could have been even less close had India held on to a couple of catches, right? They were
right?
not
That's
difficult
true.
catches at all. Pant dropped one, Arshdeep dropped one on his bowling. There might have been another one. Of course, Aksar took that amazing catch. Um, so who knows, man? But yeah, I think India kind of dominated Australia at its own game. Like this is how Australia plays, and so when Rohit was batting, I absolutely remember thinking, man, this is what Travis Head does. So we've kind of at the very least matched what Travis Head can do at the top of the order. And sure enough, while Head didn't play as much, as well, and as long as or didn't score as much as Rohit did, I mean, he was dominant when he was playing,
Hmm.
right? But Rohit provided that and some more right at the stop, and that I think it's obvious, but that made the difference. He set the tone, and things kind of didn't look back from there.
Yeah, I think the key to the games. I mean, you're right. I mean, India could have definitely, gotten easier, but I think the key was a Akshar Patel catch of Mitch Marsh of Kuldeep Yadav, and of course, Kuldeep was the pick of the bowlers. I mean, he was definitely,
He was
even
getting
Bumrah
matched
was a
well.
little. I would say Bumrah was a little off yesterday. Not his usual self. I mean, he did give a little more runs than he normally does, but give him credit for staying there. But Kuldeep, 2 for 24
But
in
it's a
four
good
overs.
thing, Sridhar. It's a good thing that you don't need Bumrah to win. It's like every match we can't count on him to do 4 overs and 16 runs and 2 wickets or 3 wickets or something like that, right? I mean, England's going to be the same way. If Bumrah is going to bowl in a couple of overs in the power play to guys like Salt and Butler and Bairstow, I mean, he's going to get hit. Those guys are going to, I mean, they might get out as well, but they're going to try to hit him over the top. Absolutely, right? Nobody's going to just play him out. So it's good for the team to like figure out other ways to win. Now, I think Hardik was terrible. Arshdeep wasn't that good. I know he got some
He
wickets.
takes wickets. That's what he does.
He does, yeah, but those were late wickets. I guess everything counts, but he bowls too many wides. His line, and he's not. He remember he bowled that 3 full tosses in a row. He got a wicket on one of them. He got very lucky that the others didn't go for sixes. He was. I don't think he was bowling well. Hardik was bowling terribly. And he gave like 39 runs or something in his first 3 overs, right? So he was off color. Jadeja got hammered in his 1 over. I thought Aksar bowled pretty well. Aksar,
Yeah,
Kuldeep,
Akshar
and
was, he didn't
Bumrah.
bowl his full quota of overs, but in his bowling. I mean, I think that the big thing everybody's going to be talking about is a catch. But I mean, if not for that catch, the way Mitchell Marsh was going in, I mean, that would have been, he could have changed the game very quickly. Um, so that was impressive win by India. I mean, like I said, Rohit set the
Totally.
tone. Yadav and Dubey and Pandya set the, although it was a little disappointing that they didn't finish on a high note, but give them credit. They crossed 200, and then once they put the pressure on Australia, I think they won pretty easily. That the other match I did want to definitely talk about, which had a lot of implications on semi-final, because we knew both, South Africa and England. They played each other, and then both of them were clearly the best teams in their um, Super 8 bracket. But the match yesterday between Afghanistan and Bangladesh, and going into that match until yesterday at 1 a.m. Eastern Time, you did not know which of the three teams could
Yeah.
make the semifinals. And I
Yeah.
think I would say around like close to the thing, because once Bangladesh was not chasing this total
Right.
in 12 overs, you knew that Bangladesh was out. So it came down to Australia and Afghanistan. And it seemed like Australia would get in because the way Bangladesh was going, they were chasing a very meager total of 115 runs, but they lost by uh, 8 runs against Afghanistan. But Lytton Das, the opener, stayed complete throughout the innings, but he just did not, I would say, ease off some of the pressure. Um, in the middle part of the innings, and Afghanistan just kept coming in, and Rashid Khan is Rashid Khan. He gets the breakthrough, and once he gets the breakthrough, it was up to the rest of the bowlers to come, and Naveen especially was the pick of the bowlers with 4 wickets. So your thoughts, and then of course Rashid was 4 wickets for 23 runs. I mean, just incredible.
I mean, what I was surprised was, Afghanistan, I thought settled for a pretty low score. I mean, they were like, again, they had a good opening partnership and everything. I don't, I mean, maybe Bangladesh bowled that well, but they were not trying to hit. And I don't know what their team mentality is where they don't like to lose wickets. I mean, you don't get any prizes in T20 for, finishing your innings with like 6 wickets left or anything like that. So and I think they have good hitters down the line. So maybe they're not in touch because the openers have been playing well, but because they don't want to lose wickets at the start, I thought even against Australia and then here, they played pretty conservatively, and it almost hurt them, right?
Hmm.
I don't think 115 was a great score, and then so I think there was a dynamic where Bangladesh had to get those in 12 overs, and so they were trying, and that's why they went for it. And then they got to 34 for three, and I think that's where the Chanto said that he said, "Okay, now I'm going to pull off and try to win the match instead," right? So I think that dynamic played in. Like if that didn't exist and if Bangladesh was chasing 115, I don't think they would have tried to hit and all that much, and get to like 32 in 3 overs and all that. I don't think they would have done that, and they would have maybe played more steadily and possibly won the match, right? So I think that whole dynamic of where there was an incentive for Bangladesh to win the match in 12.2 overs actually played a role in Afghanistan eventually winning the match
Right.
and eliminating
Right.
Australia.
Yeah.
But you were right, man. I mean, there's like so many rain breaks, and so if play didn't resume, there are all these DLS scenarios, and literally at different points in time, we all felt okay. Bangladesh has a shot, especially early, or you know what? No, but they're going to win the match, and so Australia's going to get in.
Hmm.
Oh, and then they started, then they became, I think this eighth wicket partnership or ninth went for some time. So again, there was this period where, and then the ninth fell, and then the 10th fell, and that finally when it happened, right? So that's fascinating. I would argue even the South Africa West Indies match was very similar,
Hmm.
very amazing. Like it's like seesaw completely. At one point they were dominating. South Africa was like totally going to win, and out of a very easy situation, they started losing wickets. And West Indies didn't do themselves any favors. They gave away so many extras and misspeeds and this and that, and it came pretty close. I mean, I know they won with the first ball of the 20th over, so it almost like 1 over the spread, but it was a really close match. That one too.
Yeah. The one other team I know which didn't make the semifinals, I did definitely want to touch was the maybe we can call it the resurgence of the West Indies, the host nation.
Hmm.
They played pretty well throughout the tournament. I mean, they beat New. I mean, they beat some very good teams. Obviously, they beat New Zealand. They embarrassed Afghanistan by 104 runs in the group stages, and obviously they fell. England, even though they scored 180 for four, their batting faltered, and then of course, Phil Salt was just in a different zone that day, and Bairstow too. And then West Indies, completely dominated United States. That was expected. And the West Indies South Africa match was South Africa won with just 3 balls, like you said, right? I mean, again, that was another DLS method that they lost. So, resurgence of West Indies, I would call it during this tournament, definitely a positive sign for um, uh,
I agree. I
a
agree. I mean,
team that had so much, that dominated the sport for many years, obviously in different form of cricket, but I see that the West Indies is definitely on it. Is a team that's definitely on the upswing because they did beat Australia in the Test matches too.
see, they have match winners, but so there's no dearth of talent there. I think it's always consistency has been their biggest issue, right? Like on their day, I mean, you saw it in the whatever 2016 or whatever T20 World Cup, right? When
Hmm.
Bradford hit Ben
They
Stokes
are the
four
previous World Cup
sixes,
winners,
right?
right?
Like they've won a couple of actually, they won just like England, they won two
They're
T20
more.
World
They
Cup,
won more than India actually right now.
right? So on their day, they're capable of beating anyone, but it's not their day always.
Okay, so let's quickly dive into the semifinal uh,
Mhm.
preview. Let's start with the first match, which is South Africa and Afghanistan. And which way do you see this going? Why do you think the team that you're picking is going to win? And let's talk about that.
Yeah, yeah. I do think these are the two weaker teams out of the 14 remaining. Um, Again, on paper, South Africa should win because unless Afghanistan changes their approach, uh, Afghanistan's got a good bowling attack, and and the spinners with South Africa they've been doing really well. Even Markram bowled the last game as a slow bowler, and he did well as well. So they've got Maharaj and Shamsi. I think that can be a handful. So I actually think this it might not again be a very high scoring game. maybe in the 140s, 150s at most, maybe in the 130s as well.
Hmm.
And whoever holds their nerve is going to win. I, if I were, if I were to pick, I would pick South Africa because I think Afghanistan might be done giving it. They might be emotionally and physically drained. Sometimes that happens when you have these big come from behind moments, and like which takes a lot of out of you, a lot of adrenaline, a lot of excitement, but then it drains you after that. So and they'll have to bat more aggressively. Their openers, they will have to be okay with losing a couple of wickets and the things like that, and trust their batting later on, because otherwise they're going to end up with a 120, 130 score again. Because South African bowling attack, at least their spin attack, is pretty good.
Yeah, I feel when I look at, like I said, we both touched upon South Africa as a team that has won very close matches
Hmm.
uh, this year, and of course we talked about the unbeaten um, streak that they have going on right now. Uh, they have a very powerful batting lineup. We talked about that, and that goes all the way to number seven. I mean, no doubt, right? I mean, you have Markham, you got Quinton, DeCock, and then Clausen, I mean, Miller, and then on the bowling side, you do have uh, Rabada, and then you got North J. So they have a very potent bowling attack as well. And like we talked about the batting, anybody on a given day, they could definitely come. I mean, Miller could just instantly turn the match very easily. And when I look at Afghanistan, and before we get to the thing, who do you think? You said South Africa. You're definitely picking South Africa to win it.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, again, in all of these matches, anything can happen, as we saw over the last couple of days, right? I
Hmm.
mean, Afghanistan just beat Australia and then had trouble beating Bangladesh in a match that would get them into the semis, right? So you kind of saw contrasting performances from them. And then South Africa too, they had to win the match against West Indies. They're going along, and then they had their sputter, but they recovered. So both of them,
Hmm.
in some ways, recovered from potentially being eliminated for sure. Um, I think whoever holds their nerve, absolutely expect it to be a close game. And but I do think South Africa. I think there might be something to them eking out these, uh, close wins. I think it might help them, this game, and who knows, maybe the game after that as well.
Yeah, it'll be interesting on when from a team selection. What would South Africa do? Would they go with an additional pace option in Bartman, or he's played in all the five matches this tournament, or they go with a second frontline spinner in Shamsi. I mean, Shamsi is known to
Oh,
take
Shamsi
some.
was the man of the match in the previous
Yeah,
game.
exactly. But
No, I don't think how they go back from. I mean, unless the pitches seem friendly. I have not tracked like which match is happening where and how the pitch is. Is it batting friendly or not? But I
right.
think in general, on the West Indian pitches at least, I think spinners in general are having success, either taking wickets or even keeping the scoring down. And they're able to use like the whole the wind direction and hitting against the wind and the long boundary, all those dynamics. So it's a lot of strategizing that all teams are doing, but I think spinners have done well in general.
Yeah. Okay. I
Both sides have good spinners, right? Like,
Yeah, exactly. Both
I
sides. I
mean,
mean, and
Afghanistan,
Afghanistan. Yeah. Go
Sridhar,
ahead.
Afghanistan has got 8 people who can bowl. They used 8 bowlers. I mean,
Hmm.
they don't always use all 8, but they can. I think the guy, Gulbadin, right? He's kind of their eighth guy.
Right.
So
I think
it's
there was one
amazing.
weakness in Afghanistan. It's probably their batting. That's the only thing.
Right.
They don't have a dominant one or two players. I mean, they have very good hitters, Gurbaz, but I don't see them like Australia. I mean, when you look at South Africa, um, I think they bat seven deep, like we talked about. So their batting lineup is potent, and I think that's where I can see. Um, uh, I think it's a battle. I think this is going to be a battle between South Africa's wanted batting lineup versus Afghanistan's, um, very deep bowling attack. And
Hmm.
you picked South Africa, and I'm going to say the same way, Amit. I feel South Africa. This seems to be South Africa's year. I'm going to stay with that. Um, So let's go to the next one, which is of more interest to us. Um, England uh, has had uh, I would say they were the unique position of eliminating India last World Cup, and let's talk about how do you see this going, because it's a resurgence of India versus a resurgence of England versus dominant India so
Yeah,
far.
yeah. I think India will need a game similar to what they had against Australia. This is another very aggressive side, and if you kind of rely on the last 5 overs to really accelerate and all that in general, I mean that's used to be their old mentality, right? Kind of preserve wickets, lose no more than 2 wickets in the first 12 overs, and then you kind of accelerate from 15 onwards and all that. I think that would be a mistake. But I do see that I mean, Kohli, yes, he's not in form also, but like, they're trying to be aggressive. Like a lot of times he's getting out hit, trying to hit shots, right? But so everyone, and as Rohit Sharma has explained in his post match talk, right? Everyone has a role, they know their role. So I like the strategy of the team. I like how they're executing it. One interesting dynamic is going to be, I think, except the USA game, India's batted first, right? They've not really chased, especially they're not. And the US game, they're chasing a very low score, like 100 or something like that.
110, I
And
think.
that got a bit tense for a while too, right? So there is a small chance that, you know, if England bats and puts a big score, does India have I mean, have they recently done that or not, right? And I don't know, maybe these things don't even count. These are all professionals. I mean, India's done a pretty good job going into three different venues in West Indies where they're not played on this tour before, right? Whereas teams like Australia and all that played in the West Indies all along, right? So it's I don't know which how they're going to show up if they bat second and things like that. And England against Australia and South Africa, they kind of stumbled batting second. Now, of course, they demolished weaker teams, including West Indies, batting second, I think, right?
Hmm.
Yeah. So they've batted second most of the time, actually. And India's been the other way around. India's batted first most of the time. So it'll be kind of a role reversal for both. I think, I don't know how, but I feel like India's due for batting second. So, yeah, whichever team holds its nerve. Obviously, a lot of talent on both sides. Uh, uh, England's got, I think, that, Rashid is a good spinner. I think Moeen Ali, when he gets going, he's been at least economical before. So, but I think England is a little bit more reliant on pace. I mean, Livingston might bowl a couple of overs, but I don't think they have any other spinner, right? Am I missing anyone? Sridhar?
Hmm.
Do they have any frontline spinner other than Rashid and
Well, they
Moeen
do
Ali?
have Adil Rashid. Like we talked about Rashid, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah, yeah.
then we talked about obviously they have Moin Ali. But other than that,
So it's spin.
um,
I mean, it's pace, mainly pace then, right?
yeah, I think it's pretty much their entire team is based on. They do have like Will Jacks who can sometimes bowl spin, um, but it's
Okay.
mostly Sam Curran. Then you have
Yeah.
Jordan, Archer, Wood,
So
Topley. Oh, they
yeah,
do have
I
Tom
think India's
Hartley.
done I feel India's done better against the pacers than the spinners in general, or not just this tournament, but for many years now. I think their spin play has not been that great, but except like guys like Surya, I think Dubey's pretty good. Got a few people who can do that, but not everyone, right? So, I mean, in some ways, maybe that matchup helps India a bit. That compared to, let's say, South Africa or Afghanistan, just stacked with good spinners. England maybe is one spinner short. Maybe, who knows? Um, so that will be interesting. But I expect all these games to be extremely close, and all it takes is one Rohit Sharma kind of an innings, or whoever, it might be a Phil Salt or a Butler or a Bairstow kind of an innings, right?
Mhm.
And someone has to score 80, stay there, score 80, 100. That makes all the difference. So, and we know both sides are capable of that.
Yeah.
And Kohli
There,
is due for one, man. Kohli is due. I think, I think this is the game he kind of makes an impact.
I hope so, and I think let's touch upon quickly. We talked about we know who are the Indian bowlers going to be. I think they're right now settled, at least from that standpoint. Bumrah, Kuldeep, Arshdeep, um, and Hardik Pandya. Obviously,
Akshar Patel.
Dubey has actually
Akshar.
proved his. Yeah,
Yeah.
of course, Axar too. But Dubey has proved his, you know, form in the last two matches, especially with like
Mhm.
20s and 30s. But what do you think about if India brings in Jaiswal, drops Kohli, considering where Kohli is in right now on his form, maybe, and you said punt plays three, and then Kohli goes four, and then sit Jadeja for the match. Your thoughts on that before we get to the actual prediction?
Yeah, I mean, I was hoping they would have brought Jaiswal in earlier. I mean, he is absolutely dominant when he gets going. Like, he's like Shehwag, at the beginning, top of the innings. He can absolutely dominate bowlers and put them on the back foot immediately. I I don't know if they'll bring him like in an elimination game. I think they should have probably brought him for one or two games sometime before, maybe. So I don't know if they're going to disturb what's worked for them. Um, I would be shocked if he makes it. And then if he makes it, the question is, does he replace Kohli outright? Which I again seriously doubt. I don't think they're going to drop Virat Kohli. I think there might be still some like political ramifications from that as well. But like purely from a selection basis, they'll give him his chance because he's amazing and
Yeah,
he's really adapted his game. Too bad that he hasn't gotten going
yeah.
here
That's probably the only change I see happening with Jaiswal coming in
with
and
Jadeja, right?
Jadeja sitting because India
Yeah.
does have enough six bowlers without.
Well, I mean, you don't want to really bank on Dubey. I've seen him bowl. He is like your absolute emergency option. So the team has to feel comfortable with that because Jadeja is obviously much more experienced bowler. So let's say like in the Australia match, Hardik was getting hit. Like too bad Jadeja got hit. Otherwise, maybe Hardik wouldn't have gotten as many overs if Jadeja didn't get hit by Maxwell in his first over, right? Like, so you need that. I don't think Dubey is that kind of a backup. So I don't know if the team will do that. But if we look at it objectively, Jadeja and Kohli, but especially Jadeja has been one person who's really not performed. I mean, he hasn't got many batting chances, and whatever he did, he hasn't done anything with it. And then he hasn't gotten much bowling chances. I mean, I think he's bowled one over in the last three games, like one over each. I think. I don't think he's gotten more than two, 3 overs ever. Like he's been definitely underutilized, bowling the least overs among the six bowlers. So that makes you wonder, right? Like, so what's his role? I mean, yeah, maybe for fielding, I think we do need good fielders, and sometimes catches or runouts does win matches. So I would be shocked if Jaiswal makes it. Let me put it this way. But if he comes in, I think we both agree that replacing Jadeja might be the most obvious slot.
Okay, all right. So let's get down to predictions then.
Hey, I'm gonna be loyal to my team. I mean, I like their new attitude. I think that is a difference from the past. Now, it's a double-edged sword, right? Just like it happens with teams like Australia and England as well, right? Sometimes you hit out, and if we lose two wickets in the first 3 overs where both Sharma and Kohli try to hit, then we'll be saying, "Man, why did they hit?" And all we'll we'll talk on the other side of our mouth. But before going into the game, I like that attitude. You need that attitude. You need to trust your lower order. We've got Jadeja comes in at number 8, so that's a pretty decent deep batting lineup. And Dubey's played some, Hardik has played some, Surya has played some, so and now Sharma has played. Like so except Kohli, everyone has gotten some meaningful contribution. Pant has played a couple of good innings
Hmm.
at the back, so it's not like you remember in the ODI World Cup that happened last year, right? Like our top three were dominating, and like the middle order was hardly getting tested because the top three or four were dominating. And then when the time came for them to perform because the top order collapsed, they couldn't, right? Not to a large extent. So at least the middle order and even the lower order has been battle tested that way for batting. So and I think this Australia game will help them also because yes, they did get hammered for 180 runs, but they still won by 30 runs, right? So I'm going to pick India, fully knowing I would not absolutely be shocked if India loses the game because that's been the trend for them in big games. I would not be shocked at all, but I'm just picking them. I also like their matchup versus England bowlers because England has more fast bowlers than spinners, and I think spin could have been a little bit of a weak point for India. So yeah, I'm going with India.
Yeah, I think I'm going to stay that way too, Amit. I think we're both going with no controversial picks here. I think we're based on the performance by India. I think this is a team that is playing. They can always, bring in Bumrah when the going gets tough on the bowling side of things. They bring in Bumrah or Kuldeep, uh, and then they attack the batsmen. And then when you talk about the batting, um, everyone from except like you said, Kohli and Jadeja have performed in some capacity, whether it's contributing 30, 40 runs or, half centuries. And then hopefully we can channel Rohit's amazing hitting against Australia for the semi-final and maybe the final. But I think we're both staying with South Africa and India, which have been the two best teams. I mean, they've gone undefeated so far. So I think why not go with it, right?
Yeah,
So
I think there's some caveats there. I think India can't afford like poor sloppy fielding, missed catches. They'll have to clean that up a bit. I think Pant was really sloppy behind the stumps in this past game, right? I think he did give away some runs that he shouldn't have, and all those runs, you know, luckily for India, it wasn't a close game. Otherwise, it would have mattered. And India has to be prepared. I mean, some other bowler needs to step up, right? Like because if I'm England, I I think Butler or Salt, one of them can like I don't think they're going to play Bumrah out. Like they will go after him too, right? So they'll try to disrupt the line and all that. So you should expect again that if Bumrah or Kuldeep, for example, Kuldeep has not been hit so far, and these guys, English batters, they are fully capable of hitting those massive sixes, right?
mhm,
They're good at their reverse sweeps and things like that too. Some of it which we saw in the, it's the baseball cricket, right? And some of the players, not actually, there's only few players on that baseball team, honestly, but you know what I mean, right? So yeah, I think India. If I'm England, I'm attacking Kuldeep from the word go, just like India did to Zampa, and India should expect that, right? So eventually it'll come down to execution, and if Kuldeep has an off day, someone else will have to step up. Otherwise, they're looking at 200
right.
plus to chase if that sets.
Okay. And then, we can definitely come back and pick the finalists at some point. But, initially, even if we are picking South Africa and India,
Yeah,
for now, I mean, I think I will stay India to win the final. I mean, if they both in the
and let's
final.
do one
But
on Thursday, depending on who. I mean, we haven't exactly had a great track record, right? We were both 50%.
that's true.
So maybe we got one right and one wrong. Who knows, right? So maybe on Thursday, right? The games will be over Thursday morning itself, right? So maybe Thursday evening, 2 days from now, let's do
Yep.
this again.
Okay. All
Uh,
right. That's
Whoever's
good.
made it to
I
the
know this
final.
was a pretty long podcast, but I do think that we were trying to cover, we did the Super 8 preview, but then there were a lot of matches in Super 8, but there were some incredible upsets, but we also wanted to touch upon some of these teams going into the semifinals. So, thanks again, Amit. And then, hang on a bit while I, complete
Yeah,
the recording. So,
sounds
good
good.
night again. So just stay on for a little bit.
Take care.